My mother wants me and my siblings to forgive our older brother for stealing our other brother's fiancée, saying, family is family. Years later, karma hit them so hard, and now they are begging for our forgiveness. I've always thought my family was different, not in some dramatic movie-style way or anything, but just in how tight we were growing up. We had this unspoken rule about loyalty that our parents drilled into us like it was the most important thing in the world. Blood is thicker than water was practically the family motto. Our parents would always say that when they were gone, the only people we could truly rely on were each other. They had this weird way of teaching us about loyalty that, looking back, was kind of extreme. If one of us snitched on a sibling, it didn't matter who was in the wrong, both of us would get punished. Like if Mike stole candy and I tattled, we'd both lose TV privileges for a week. My mom would say the problem isn't the candy, it's the broken trust. It made no sense to me as a kid, but now I get it. They weren't trying to raise perfect kids, they were trying to raise a family that stuck together no matter what. The thing is, it actually worked. My siblings and I grew up really close. There's Mike, the oldest at 29, who always had this golden aura around him. He was the typical firstborn son type, athletic, popular, and charming. He was the guy everyone wanted to be or be with. Then there's my older sister Anna, who's 26 and probably the most level-headed of all of us. She's the one you go to when you need advice or someone to help you figure out your life. Luke, 25, is my closest sibling. He's the quiet one but not in a shy way, he's just thoughtful. And then there's me, the baby of the family at 22, who probably knows way too much about everyone's drama because I'm the one they all vent to. Out of all of us, Luke always felt like he had the most to prove. He wasn't as naturally talented as Mike or as academically gifted as Anna. Everything he achieved, he worked for. While Mike breezed through life, Luke was grinding to get noticed. I think that's why we bonded so much. I saw how hard he tried and respected the hell out of him for it. Mike was just that guy. You know the type, the star quarterback who dated the head cheerleader and somehow still aced his math test? Even as a kid, he had this air about him like he was destined for bigger things. People were drawn to him, and he loved the attention. But while everyone else saw him as perfect, we knew he could be selfish. He wasn't mean or anything, just thoughtless. He'd take the last slice of pizza without asking or borrow your stuff without returning it, small things that added up over time. But because he was Mike, no one ever called him out on it. My parents definitely played favorites, even if they didn't mean to. Mike could do no wrong in their eyes. If he got in trouble at school, it was the teacher's fault for not understanding him. If he slacked off at home, they'd say he was just tired from football practice. Luke, on the other hand, had to fight for every scrap of attention. If he brought home a B on his report card, my dad would ask why it wasn't an A. If he made the basketball team, Mike would joke that he was only on the bench. I could see it hurt him even if he tried to laugh it off. But despite all that, Luke idolized Mike. He wanted so badly to impress him, to be seen as an equal. He worked out religiously to keep up with Mike's physique and even joined the same gym as him. He'd ask Mike for advice about girls even though Mike's advice was always terrible. It was like he was chasing this impossible standard, trying to prove he was just as good, if not better, and honestly, I think Mike liked having Luke look up to him. It fed into his ego. For a while though, everything seemed fine. Luke found his own way to stand out, working a great job and building a life he could be proud of, and then he met Sarah. Sarah was, well, she was perfect for Luke, at least that's what we all thought at the time. She was smart, funny, and kind of nerdy in a way that matched Luke's personality. She brought out this side of him that we hadn't seen before, more confident and more relaxed. When he proposed to her after 2 years of dating, we were all over the moon. He was the first of us to get engaged, and it felt like a milestone for the whole family. Even Mike seemed genuinely happy for him, which should have been my first red flag. Looking back, there were signs. Mike and Sarah got along a little too well at first. It seemed harmless. Sarah was bubbly and outgoing while Mike was his usual charming self, but sometimes their jokes felt like inside jokes, ones Luke wasn't part of. They'd sit next to each other at family dinners and talk like old friends. Luke never said anything but I could tell it bothered him. He'd glance at them with this look I couldn't quite read. I didn't think much of it at the time because loyalty was everything in our family. The idea that Mike would betray Luke in any way was unthinkable. We were raised to have each other's backs no matter what, and Sarah? She seemed so genuinely in love with Luke that the thought of her stringing him along never crossed my mind. Luke wasn't the type to open up about his feelings easily. He'd always been the strong silent one in the family. So when he finally told me he was having doubts about Sarah and Mike, I could tell it wasn't something he'd decided on a whim. It wasn't like he wanted to believe it either. The way he said it quietly, almost like he didn't want those words to exist, it broke my heart a little. We were sitting in my living room, just the two of us, when he dropped it on me. Do you ever feel like Sarah and Mike are weirdly close? He asked, staring down at the coffee table like it had the answer. Weird how? I asked, genuinely caught off guard. I don't know, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. It's just sometimes it feels like they're too comfortable around each other, like they have their own thing going on and I'm just there. I tried to brush it off at first. They're probably just friendly. Sarah's outgoing like that, and you know how Mike is, he's like that with everyone. Luke nodded but didn't look convinced. Maybe, he muttered, but then added almost to himself, it just doesn't feel right. That night stuck with me, not because I believed him right away but because of how much it seemed to hurt him. Luke wasn't paranoid by nature, he didn't jump to conclusions or overreact. If he was feeling this way, it had to be for a reason. Still, I told myself it was just in his head. Sarah loved Luke, they were planning a wedding. Mike might have been selfish sometimes but he wasn't cruel. It was easier to believe that Luke was imagining things than confront the possibility that he wasn't. But then I started noticing things, little things, the way Sarah would glance at Mike when she thought no one was looking, the way Mike seemed to go out of his way to make her laugh. Once during a family barbecue, Sarah and Mike were sitting together on the patio deep in conversation while Luke was inside grabbing drinks, and when he came back out, the way Sarah pulled away from Mike was weird, like she'd been caught doing something she shouldn't. I wanted to believe it was nothing. I wanted to chalk it up to my own paranoia, as if Luke's suspicions were contagious, and now I was seeing things that weren't there, but the more I watched, the harder it was to ignore. One night about a month after Luke first confided in me, I decided to test the waters. We were all at Mom's house for dinner. Me, Luke, Mike, Sarah, and Anna. The atmosphere was light and happy, the way it always was when we were together. At one point I made a joke about how Luke and Sarah were like an old married couple already, always bickering but clearly in love. Everyone laughed, but I noticed Sarah's laugh was a little forced, and Mike? He didn't laugh at all. Instead he gave this awkward half-smile and looked down at his plate. It was such a small thing, but it sent a chill down my spine. If there was nothing going on, why did they both look so uncomfortable? I started paying closer attention after that, not in a creepy stalking way, but just observing. Sarah always seemed more animated around Mike, her eyes would light up when he walked into the room, and she'd lean in just a little too close when they talked. Mike for his part seemed to thrive on her attention. He'd tease her in ways that felt less like a brother-in-law and more like something else. One night I caught Mike looking at Sarah in a way that made my stomach turn. It wasn't a friendly look or even a casual one, it was longing. I remember thinking, no. I'm just imagining things, but deep down I wasn't so sure. I tried to bring it up with Luke again, but he shut me down. I don't want to talk about it, he said sharply. I'm probably just being stupid. You're not stupid, I said. If something feels off, you should trust your gut. Luke just shook his head. Even if I'm right, what can I do? Call them out? But if it's nothing, then I'll just look like an idiot. What if it's something, and I lose everything? I didn't have an answer for that. What could he do? Confronting them would blow up his entire life, ignoring it would eat him alive. He was stuck in this limbo, doubting himself and the people he loved most. I didn't know how to help him. All I could do was be there for him and hope it was all a big misunderstanding, but the more I watched, the less I believed that. Update 1. The final straw for me came during another family gathering about 2 weeks before everything fell apart. We were playing a game of charades, and it was Sarah's turn. She was acting out something, probably a movie or a TV show, and Mike kept shouting out guesses. They were laughing, and the energy between them felt intimate, like they were the only two people in the room. Luke was sitting next to me, his jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. When the game ended, he got up and went to the bathroom. He didn't come back for a long time. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the way Sarah and Mike interacted. It wasn't just friendly, it wasn't even flirtatious. It was familiar, like they knew each other in a way they shouldn't. I wanted to believe I was wrong, but deep down, I wasn't, and I think Luke knew it too. Looking back, I wish I'd said something sooner. Maybe if I had, things would have played out differently. Maybe I could have spared Luke some of the pain he was about to go through. But at the time, I was too scared to rock the boat, too scared to face the truth. Then the truth came out anyway. The day it all came out started like any other. I wasn't even home when it happened. I got a call from Luke in the middle of the night, his voice shaking like I'd never heard before. He didn't even make sense at first. It was like his words were tripping over each other, and I could hear how wrecked he was through the phone. All I caught were the words Sarah, Mike, and cheating. By the time I got to his place, he was sitting on the couch, head in his hands, looking like he'd just been hit by a truck. There was an empty beer bottle on the floor, and his phone was lying face down on the coffee table like it had betrayed him too. When he finally looked up at me, his eyes were red and swollen. It was clear he hadn't stopped crying for hours. She left, he said, his voice hoarse. She left? What do you mean she left? Where did she go? I asked, trying to piece it together. To Mike, he spat the name out like it physically hurt him. She said she's in love with him, that she's been in love with him this whole time. It felt like the air got sucked out of the room. I sat down next to him, stunned. I didn't even know what to say. This wasn't just some fight or a relationship ending. This was our brother, the same guy who was supposed to have Luke's back, the guy we all grew up trusting implicitly. How could he do something like this? She told me she's been sleeping with him for months, Luke continued, his voice breaking. Months. While we were planning the wedding. While I thought she loved me. I didn't realize I was crying until I felt a tear roll down my cheek. I wasn't even sure who I was crying for, Luke because he didn't deserve this or myself because the family I thought I knew was crumbling right in front of me. Luke's phone buzzed, and we both stared at it like it was a bomb about to go off. He didn't pick it up, but I saw the name on the screen, Mike. That keeps calling, Luke said, his voice hardening. What does he even want? To apologize? To explain? Like there's anything he can say that would make this better. I didn't have an answer for that either. What could Mike possibly say? Sorry I stole your fiancée? It was so absurd that it almost didn't feel real. The next morning after Luke finally passed out on the couch, I decided I couldn't just sit there and do nothing. I drove to Mike's house, barely able to see straight through the rage clouding my vision. When he opened the door, he looked like he hadn't slept either. Good, he didn't deserve to. What the hell is wrong with you? I snapped, not even waiting for him to say anything. Do you have any idea what you've done? Mike tried to interrupt, but I didn't let him. No. Shut up. You don't get to talk. You don't get to explain this away. You've destroyed him. Mike. You've destroyed him. And for what? Some girl? Are you really that selfish? She's not just some girl, Mike finally said defensively. I love her. I wanted to punch him. I've never wanted to hit someone so badly in my life. You love her? I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Wow. That makes it all better. Doesn't it? Forget the fact that she was your brother's fiancée. Forget the fact that you've ruined our family. As long as you're in love, it's fine, right? Mike didn't say anything. He just stood there looking at me like he was the victim in all of this. It made me sick. You've always been selfish, I said, my voice shaking with anger, but this? This is a whole new level. I hope she's worth it, Mike, because you've just lost the rest of us. And with that, I walked away. I didn't wait for him to respond because honestly, I didn't care what he had to say. There was nothing he could say that would make this okay. When I got back to Luke's place, he was awake and sitting at the kitchen table staring at his phone. He looked up at me with hollow eyes. Did you talk to him? He asked. Yeah, I said. It didn't help. Luke nodded like he expected that. I don't think I can ever forgive him, he said quietly, or her. You don't have to, I told him. You don't owe them anything. Over the next few days, news spread to the rest of the family. Anna was furious. Our dad was livid. He called Mike and tore into him saying he was no son of his anymore. Our mom though? She had a different reaction. He's still your brother, she said when I talked to her. People make mistakes. He's in love. You can't blame him for that. Can't blame him? I shot back. He betrayed Luke. He betrayed all of us. How can you just brush that aside? Because he's my son, she said firmly. And I won't turn my back on him. It felt like a slap in the face. How could she defend him after what he'd done? How could she expect the rest of us to just move on? But that's exactly what she did. She started visiting Mike and Sarah acting like everything was fine, like our family hadn't been ripped apart, and every time she tried to get us to forgive him, it felt like she was choosing Mike over the rest of us, over Luke. I wish I could say that was the end of it, but it wasn't. This wasn't something that could be swept under the rug. It was a betrayal that cut too deep, one that left scars none of us could ignore, and as much as I wanted to move on, to pretend like it didn't matter, I couldn't because every time I looked at Luke, I saw the damage Mike and Sarah had done, and it wasn't something any of us would forget. The fallout from Mike and Sarah's betrayal was like a slow-motion car crash. You see it coming but there's no way to stop it. It didn't just ruin Luke, it tore our entire family apart. It's hard even to pinpoint when it started because once everything was out in the open there was no going back. Luke was a shell of himself after that night. He stayed at my apartment for a while because he couldn't stand being in the house he used to share with Sarah. Every little thing reminded him of her, the photos on the walls, the coffee mugs they bought together, the stupid TV shows they used to binge. He told me once that silence was the worst part, like her absence was louder than her presence had ever been. I'd never seen Luke like this before. He was always strong, the guy who could handle anything, but now he looked completely lost. He stopped going to the gym, stopped taking care of himself, and barely ate. I tried getting him out of the house, even just for a walk around the block, but he wasn't interested. He'd just sit on my couch staring at TV, not really watching it while his phone buzzed on the table. Mike kept calling. At first Luke just ignored it, but eventually blocked his number. That didn't stop Mike from trying though. He sent emails, texts from random numbers, even messages through mutual friends. He kept saying he wanted to talk, to explain, but Luke wasn't having it. What's there to explain? He said one day bitterly. He wanted her so he took her, end of story. Our dad was just as angry as Luke but showed it differently. He completely cut Mike off. To him what Mike did wasn't just betrayal, it was failure of character, something dad couldn't forgive. He called me after finding out saying that boy isn't my son anymore. Even though dad tried sounding tough, I could hear hurt in his voice. For dad loyalty meant everything, and Mike had thrown it away, but mom? Mom couldn't bring herself cutting Mike off no matter how much he'd hurt us. All she kept saying, he's still my son. She started visiting Mike and Sarah at their new place pretending what they'd done wasn't giant elephant in room. Every time I'd try talking about she'd brush me off saying you don't understand. He made mistake but he's still family. It wasn't just that she forgave Mike, it's that she expected us doing same. She kept pushing Luke talking even going so far inviting Mike over without telling Luke. I still remember day Luke found out mom planned family dinner acting normal get together. Luke agreed coming thinking it'd be just me and a parents, but when walked in seeing Mike sitting table froze. Update 2, the tension in the room was suffocating. Luke didn't say a word, he just turned around and walked out. I followed him outside, where he was pacing back and forth, his hands clenched into fists. Why would she do this? He asked, his voice shaking with anger. Why would she think this is okay? I didn't have an answer. All I could do was tell him what I knew he needed to hear, that he wasn't crazy, that he wasn't overreacting, and that he had every right to cut Mike out of his life if that's what he needed to heal. After that, Luke stopped talking to mom altogether. It wasn't a dramatic decision, there was no big fight or tearful goodbye. He just stopped picking up her calls. I think it hurt him more than he let on, but he couldn't keep dealing with her constant attempts to reconcile him with Mike. It was like she couldn't understand that some things can't be fixed. Anna handled things differently. She was furious, but in her quiet, calculated way, she told Mike exactly what she thought of him in one scathing phone call and then blocked his number. She still talked to mom, but their relationship became strained. Every time mom brought up Mike, Anna would shut her down. He's dead to me, she told her once. Stop trying to bring him back. As for me, I was somewhere in the middle. I couldn't forgive Mike, but I couldn't bring myself to cut mom off completely, even though her actions felt like a betrayal too. She kept trying to play the peacemaker, but all she was doing was making things worse. At one point, she even suggested we all go to therapy together, her, Luke, Mike, and me. We need to fix this, she said, like it was just a broken chair or a leaky faucet. Fix what? I snapped. Luke doesn't need therapy with Mike. Mike needs to take a long look in the mirror and realize he's the problem. She didn't bring it up again after that. The final nail in the coffin came when Mike and Sarah got engaged. I don't know what I expected. Of course they were going to get married eventually. But seeing the invitation in my mailbox still felt like a punch to the gut. They had the nerve to send it to all of us, like they thought we'd actually show up and celebrate their love. I didn't even tell Luke about it at first because I knew how much it would hurt him, but he found out anyway when Mom brought it up during one of her rare phone calls with him. I should go, Luke told me, his voice flat. It's time to move on. Can you believe that? I could. Unfortunately, Mom had been saying the same thing to me and Anna for months. Family is family, she kept saying, as if that were supposed to make everything better. None of us went to the wedding, not me, not Luke, not Anna, and definitely not Dad. Mom went, of course. She even posted photos on Facebook, smiling like everything was fine. When I saw them, I felt like I didn't even know her anymore. In the end, the fallout wasn't just about Mike and Sarah, it was about the cracks they exposed in our family, the loyalty we thought we had but didn't. Mike's betrayal was the spark, but Mom's refusal to acknowledge the damage made it worse. Now nothing feels the same. After Mike and Sarah got engaged, the family split became official. It wasn't like we held a meeting or made some grand decision to go our separate ways, it just happened naturally, like a crack in the foundation of a house. The damage was already done and there was no going back. Mike and Sarah moved into their new life while the rest of us tried to figure out how to navigate what was left of ours. Luke understandably had the hardest time. He stayed quiet about his feelings most of the time, but you could see the weight he was carrying. He wasn't the same person anymore. He used to be this driven, confident guy who could take on anything, but now it was like he was just going through the motions. Work, sleep, repeat. He'd stopped talking about the future, stopped mentioning any of the things he used to be excited about. It was like a piece of him had been stolen and he didn't know how to get it back. We all adjusted in different ways. Dad became colder and more distant. He wasn't the type to share his emotions in the first place, but after Mike's betrayal it was like he put up an even higher wall. He refused to acknowledge Mike or Sarah's existence even in casual conversation. If someone accidentally brought them up, he'd change the subject immediately. For him, they were gone, simple as that. He wouldn't even entertain the idea of reconciliation, which was one of the few things I actually agreed with him on. Anna threw herself into work. She was already a busy person but now it felt like she was using her job as a way to escape the family drama. She'd always been the mediator, the one who tried to keep the peace, but even she couldn't fix this. I think that realization hit her hard. She stopped coming to family dinners and stopped answering Mom's calls as often. It wasn't that she didn't care, it was more like she couldn't deal with it anymore. And then there was Mom. Out of everyone, she seemed the most determined to pretend like everything was fine. She kept reaching out to Mike and Sarah as if they hadn't done something unforgivable. I'd hear about her visiting their place or going out to lunch with them, and every time it felt like a slap in the face. It wasn't just that she forgave them, that was bad enough, it was that she expected the rest of us to do the same. She kept saying things like you can't stay mad forever and we're still a family, as if repeating it enough times would make it true. One time she even suggested having a family reunion. We need to start fresh, she said, like it was that simple. I laughed when she brought it up, not because it was funny but because I couldn't believe she actually thought that was a good idea. Mom, I told her bluntly, no one wants to start fresh with Mike. Well, he needs to, she said, her tone sharper than I expected. Holding on to all this anger isn't healthy. Maybe he's not ready to forgive the brother who stole his fiancée, I shot back. Did you ever think of that? She didn't have an answer, but I could tell she was frustrated. I think part of her was angry at us for not letting go, but the bigger part of her was angry at herself for not being able to fix it. She wanted everything to go back to the way it was before, but that wasn't possible. The divide wasn't just emotional, it was physical too. Luke eventually sold the house he'd shared with Sarah and moved into a new apartment on the other side of town. I helped him pack up his stuff and it was one of the most depressing days of my life. Every box we taped shut felt like another piece of his old life being erased. He didn't say much while we were packing but at one point he held up a photo of him and Sarah from when they first got engaged. He stared at it for a long time before finally throwing it in the trash. Good riddance, he muttered, but I could hear the pain in his voice. Anna moved too, taking a job in another city about an hour away. She said it was for her career, and maybe that was part of it, but I think she also just needed to get away from all of this. She still visited sometimes but not as often as she used to. I missed her but I couldn't blame her for leaving. If I had the chance to escape, I probably would have done the same. As for me? I felt stuck. I couldn't leave because I felt like someone needed to stay behind and hold the pieces together, even if it was a lost cause. I kept in touch with Luke, saw Dad regularly, and talked to Anna whenever she had time, but Mom, our relationship became strained. Every conversation with her felt like a tug of war. She'd try to convince me to reach out to Mike and I'd try to convince her to stop pretending like nothing was wrong. Neither of us ever won. Final update. The worst part was that Mike and Sarah didn't seem to care about the damage they'd caused. They were living their lives, posting happy photos on social media, acting like they hadn't torn the family apart. It was infuriating. I wanted to call them out, to tell them how selfish they were being, but I knew it wouldn't make a difference. People like them don't see themselves as the villains. In their minds, they were just two people in love, and the rest of us were the problem for not accepting it. The divide grew wider with every passing month, birthdays, holidays, family milestones. They all became sources of tension. If Mom invited Mike and Sarah, the rest of us refused to go. If she didn't invite them, she'd spend the entire time sulking about how incomplete the family felt. It got to the point where we just stopped having family gatherings altogether. It was too complicated, too messy. Looking back, I don't think any of us really knew how to deal with what happened. We were all grieving in our own ways, not just for the relationships we'd lost but for the family we thought we had. It's hard to explain, but when someone you trust betrays you like that, it changes everything. It makes you question the foundation of everything you believed in, and for our family, that foundation was loyalty. It was the one thing we always thought we could count on, the thing our parents had drilled into us from the beginning. But Mike shattered that. He didn't just betray Luke, he betrayed all of us. And no matter how much Mom wanted to pretend otherwise, there was no fixing it. It's funny how life works sometimes. You think the story is over, the damage done, and then it throws another twist at you, one you didn't see coming but maybe should have. That's exactly what happened with Mike and Sarah. After everything they put Luke through, after all the bridges they burned, karma decided to show up, and when it did, it hit Mike like a freight train. Mike and Sarah got married about 6 months ago. None of us went, of course not me, not Luke, not Anna, not Dad. Mom was the only one from our side of the family there, playing proud mother and pretending like everything was fine. She even sent us photos of the ceremony like we were supposed to be happy for them. I didn't open them, none of us did. As far as we were concerned, Mike and Sarah were out of our lives for good. For a while, it seemed like they were living their perfect little life. They bought a house together, started planning a future, and plastered their social media with pictures of how happy they were. I'd be lying if I said it didn't bother me. After everything they'd done, seeing them so carefree felt like a slap in the face. But I told myself it wasn't worth my energy, they could have their fake happiness, I just wanted them to stay far away from us. Then a few weeks ago, it all came crashing down. I didn't find out from Mike directly, of course not, he hasn't spoken to any of us in over a year. It was Mom who called me, her voice frantic and shaky. Mike needs us, she said, as if that was supposed to mean something. What are you talking about? I asked, already annoyed. It's Sarah, she said. He caught her cheating. For a second I didn't say anything, I was stunned, not for the reason Mom probably thought. It wasn't shock, it was something closer to dark amusement. I couldn't help but think, well, isn't that ironic? Let me guess, I said finally, with his best friend? Mom gasped. How did you know? I laughed, I actually laughed, even though it probably wasn't the right reaction because that's exactly what he did to Luke. Looks like karma finally caught up with him, I said. Mom didn't appreciate that, she started going on about how heartbroken Mike was, how he needed his family now more than ever, how we should all rally around him to support him through this. He made a mistake, she said as if we hadn't heard that line 1,000 times before. But he's still your brother, Mom insisted. I cut her off. Mike didn't just make a mistake, he destroyed Luke. He tore this family apart. And now you want us to feel sorry for him because Sarah did to him what he did to Luke? Are you serious? He's hurting, she insisted. He didn't deserve this. Neither did Luke, I snapped. But you didn't seem to care about that when it was happening. Mom got quiet after that, but I could tell she wasn't giving up. She kept calling, trying to guilt us into reaching out to Mike. She even tried to play the family card again, saying we needed to come together and forgive, but for once none of us budged, not Luke, not Anna, not Dad. We were all on the same page. Mike made his bed and now he had to lie in it. The thing is, I don't feel sorry for him, I can't. This is exactly what he brought on himself. He betrayed Luke in the worst possible way, and now he's getting a taste of his own medicine. I hate to say it, but there's a part of me that feels satisfied knowing he finally understands what he put Luke through. Maybe that makes me a bad person, but after everything that's happened, I don't care anymore. Luke surprised me when I told him about what happened. I expected him to be angry or maybe even happy that Mike was suffering, but he just shrugged. Figures, he said, like it didn't even matter to him anymore. Does it make you feel better? I asked curiously. He thought about it for a moment before shaking his head. Not really, it doesn't change anything. He's still out of my life, and that's not going to change. Luke's response made me realize how far he's come. He's not angry anymore, not at Sarah, not at Mike. He's moved on in a way I'm not sure I have. For him this isn't about revenge or karma, it's just another chapter in a story he's already closed the book on. Anna on the other hand had a lot more to say. Serves him right, she said when I told her. I hope it hurts as much as it hurt Luke. Mom wants us to support him, I added, rolling my eyes. Anna actually laughed. Yeah, that's not happening. If Mom wants to coddle him she can, but don't expect me to play along. And then there's Dad. He hasn't said much about it, but I can tell he's not interested in mending fences. When I brought it up he just shook his head and said, that boy made his choices, now he's got to live with them. For once we're all in agreement. Mike doesn't deserve our sympathy, he doesn't deserve our support. He made his bed when he betrayed Luke, and now he's lying in it. If Mom wants to keep pretending like he's some tragic victim, that's her choice, but the rest of us? We're done. At the end of the day this isn't about revenge or schadenfreude, it's about loyalty. Mike broke that loyalty when he chose Sarah over his brother, over his family. He can't expect us to come running back now just because things didn't work out the way he wanted. Life doesn't work like that. So no, I'm not going to support Mike, none of us are, and honestly, I think that's the way it should be. He made his choices, and now he's dealing with the consequences. That's not our problem anymore. As far as I'm concerned my family is Luke, Anna, Dad, and me. The rest? They can figure it out on their own.
Asterisk, after listening to today's story, perhaps it has raised some new questions in your mind, or maybe it has brought back some old memories. Every day on Reddit, New experiences and moments create fresh stories, and they connect all of us. Everyone has their own unique journey in life, and we all try to understand the world in our own way. These kinds of moments remind us that we are all human, sometimes happy, sometimes sad, and always learning something new. If you enjoyed this story, feel free to share it with your friends. Your thoughts and feedback are always valuable to us, as they motivate us to create even better content. Every story has its own unique angle, and our goal is to understand everyone's perspective and make our content diverse and relatable. Stories like these help us realize that life's journey is different for everyone, and by hearing others' stories, we learn something new. You can also share your own stories with us. Your experiences are valuable to us as well, and if you enjoyed this video, please leave your feedback. We aim to create content that brightens your mind and gives you new ideas every time. If you've already seen this video before, your feedback is still important. With every piece of feedback, we can improve our content and bring a new perspective to our viewers. Today, what we saw was just a small part of the many stories shared on Reddit and across the world. It's a reminder of how we all try to understand life by sharing our experiences with each other. This video was only an example of how we try to connect with others through storytelling, learning about different sides of life. We hope to continue sharing such stories that help us all learn and grow together. Thank you for your time, and don't forget to keep an eye out for more stories coming soon. If you haven't already, please like and follow for more amazing content. Your support keeps us going, and we will strive to bring you more thought-provoking and heartwarming stories. Until next time, take care and stay curious. Asterisk.